Democratic Congressman André Carson of Indiana. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Wolf.
The president insisted there were some very fine people among the protesters. He said many were simply there to express support for Confederate memorials. But the facts on the ground tell a very, very different story. I want to listen to one of the leaders of the rally, the same Christopher Caldwell we just heard in Brian Todd's report, with a very, very different view expressed the other day to Vice News.
I'm trying to make myself more capable of violence. I'm here to spread ideas, talk, in the hopes that somebody more capable will come along and do that. Somebody like Donald Trump, who does not give his daughter to a Jew.
So Donald Trump, but like more racist.
A lot more racist than Donald Trump. I don't think that you could feel about race the way I do and watch that Kushner bastard walk around with that beautiful girl.
All right, Congressman Christopher Cantwell, what's your reaction to what you just heard?
It's disgusting. This kind of white supremacist ideology, mythology, has been responsible for the enslavement of Africans in this country. It has been responsible for the killing of millions of Jewish brothers and sisters in Europe. It is destructive. It is toxic. President Trump waited too long, and what he was doing in his response, delayed response, he was still dog whistling, Wolf. He was still low-key co-signing the bigotry and the hatred that these groups promote. And to hear what this person just said, to me, solidifies and concretizes what we all know, and that is that there are still dangerous elements in our country. I've said over and over again, as someone who worked for the Indiana Department of Homeland Security and counterterrorism, that white supremacist organizations specifically still pose the greatest threat to our internal security.
We've seen the reaction to the president's comments yesterday from various white supremacists, including the likes of David Duke and Richard Spencer. They feel emboldened by his comments. Do you believe the president of the United States is directly enabling them?
I think he has fanned the flames. I think he has winked at them. He's blown kisses at them. He has made inflammatory remarks throughout his campaign. He has built an echo chamber in the White House of white supremacist sympathizers and empathizers. And I think the president has all but said explicitly, I'm with you, but he doesn't have to say so explicitly. He's held their hands throughout the campaign. And I think his delayed response, again, is an indication that he fears being condemned by this group or even losing their support. But it's too little, too late, and I think he has shown who he really is.
Can the president say anything at this point to redeem himself?
Well, it's almost like asking the emperor without clothes, can he put on clothes? I mean, he's shown us who he really is. I think it's unfortunate that we've gotten to this point, but I think perhaps, Wolf, there's a silver lining here. We're seeing the activist community becoming emboldened. We're seeing Republicans who are taking a stand and saying enough is enough. We're seeing white brothers and sisters stand in solidarity and condemn these actions. We want to see more. We have to see more. But I think right now, our country, in many parts, they're unifying in a very meaningful way, but more work has to be done.
Should the president have attended the memorial service for that young woman, the 32-year-old woman, Heather Heyer, who was killed in Charlottesville? Should he have attended that memorial service today as an act of reconciliation and healing?
Absolutely, absolutely. But I think that, of course, if he's in an environment where he's uncomfortable and not being praised, he won't attend. But I think it would have been a great demonstration of leadership for him to have attended.
The chiefs of the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, they've all issued their own statements condemning the hatred and the violence in Charlottesville. How surprising is it to you, Congressman, that the top leadership of the American military, they feel compelled to speak out against racism, anti-Semitism, white supremacy in the year 2017?
Well, I think they should speak out against white supremacy, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, anti-black sentiment, anti-Latino sentiment. anti-Arab sentiment, they should speak out against it because those elements are very real and still alive in our society, unfortunately.
But the fact that they've done it in the past few days, they've all issued these very strong statements, it underscores a serious problem that the country is going through right now. I believe you agree.
Yeah, I think that our country is going through something that is ugly, it's dark. I think the fears that a lot of Americans have had, or the denial that a lot of Americans have had about notions of race, notions of religion, destructive mythologies that have been created throughout the centuries that have promoted one race over the other. I think we're finally seeing these mythologies and notions and philosophies being unearthed. Unfortunately, we have a president who is supported by these same promoters of these destructive ideologies and philosophies. But the founding fathers, extremely complicated, sexist slaveholders, were very visionary, though, Wolf, in setting up three separate but equal branches of government in anticipation of not having a tyrannical leader. So you have checks and balances. And I think what has to happen right now, the legislative branch, in a very real sense, has to become active at working in a bipartisan way to move our country forward during these very troubling times.
Very troubling times indeed. Congressman, I want you to stand by. You're a member of the House Intelligence Committee. We have much more to discuss, including a former CIA director now speaking out exclusively to CNN, saying President Trump is, quote, putting our national security and our collective futures at grave risk. We'll be right back. Our breaking news with the country and his own administration reeling from President Trump's shocking remarks about the Charlottesville, Virginia violence. Sources tell CNN that the president is, quote, without regret. We're back with Democratic Congressman André Carson of Indiana. He's a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Congressman, I want to share with you and our viewers a note I received last night from the former CIA Director John Brennan right after our show. And let me put the words up on the screen. Wolf, just watched your interview with Senator Blumenthal when you mentioned that you lost all four of your grandparents to the unspeakable evil of Nazism. I just want to extend my sympathies not only for their deaths, but also to you and your family and countless others for the pain inflicted today by the despicable words of Donald Trump. Mr. Trump's words and the beliefs they reflect are a national disgrace, and all Americans of conscience need to repudiate his ugly and dangerous comments. If allowed to continue along this senseless path, Mr. Trump will do lasting harm to American society and to our standing in the world. By his words and his actions, Mr. Trump is putting our national security and our collective futures at grave risk. Signed, John Brennan. Very, very powerful words. As a member of the Intelligence Committee, do you agree that the national security of the United States is now at risk?
I think in many ways, yes. I mean, considering the fact that some of his strongest supporters are anti-Semitic, and you know what your family has had to endure. And I think, globally speaking, I think that he has promoted himself to be a decisive leader. He promoted himself to be a bold leader, but it's clear that he is riddled with indecision, and his impulsivity, as I've said before, has in a way crippled his ability to garner the kind of support, to boost morale in the administration. I mean, I talk to folks in the State Department quite often. They talk about how the internal controls really aren't there, and how morale is low, and how they're understaffed, and they're not getting the kind of support that's so necessary from the top. And so I think as it relates to intel, he has been too cozy to Vladimir Putin. I think that coziness has caused unease with the global community, many of our Five Eye partners, and I think that his way of lashing out, of not being diplomatic. He thinks he's being bold. He loves being provocative. But that kind of provocation has limits, Wolf. And I think Director Brennan, he's right. He's a veteran. He's skilled. I have great respect for him. I've worked with him. He sits on a panel. He has sat on a panel with me and Congressman Terry Sewell of Alabama in terms of recruiting more minorities in the IC space. And I think his instincts are right.
Are you surprised that a career intelligence professional like John Brennan would feel the need to weigh in on this specific issue in those very strong words at this point?
You know, Director Brennan is a man of very few words. He's very wise, but I think for someone like him to come out and show support for you and your family and empathize, but also to make that kind of statement, it shows that he and others are concerned about the preservation of our democracy.
What can you and other lawmakers, Congressman, do to counteract this potential threat?
I think that you know, the blessing is that you have committees like the Armed Services Committee, Transportation and Infrastructure, and of course Intelligence. There are others who are probably some of the most bipartisan committees on the Hill. And the beauty lies in our ability to reach across the aisle and agree on national security issues, agree on infrastructure issues. These are universal issues. These are issues that Democrats and Republicans generally agree on. I think the blessing is that we have a separate but equal branch of government where we can put aside our differences, put aside this petty dialogue about dismantling the Affordable Care Act, and get to the real work of job creation and protecting Americans.
Congressman André Carson, thanks so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, Wolf.
Thank you. And this important note.